All right, welcome everyone. Excited to be here, excited to talk about finding open positions, and we'll just dig right in. This is what you're here for. You're here to get jobs, and we're excited to get into this content with you. At the end of our time together today, these are the things that you should be able to do. Just want to give you a heads up front what we're talking about here, what our goals are. So you should be able to clearly describe your short-term career goals coming out of Lambda School. You should be able to compare and contrast different work environments. So remote versus in-person, big company versus small company, internships versus full-time positions, and kind of identify which one you're leaning towards, and ask questions about each of those. I've got pretty good experience across the gamut, and I'm sure there are other students in the class that also have experience in those different environments. So we'll talk through those. I want you to be able to use a variety of online sources to compile leads on open job positions. So I've got a little sample tool that you can use to kind of track those leads and track your progress in applying for and interviewing at those different places. And last, I want you to be able to schedule and perform informational interviews, which is a technique to just get to know people, kind of a networking technique, but also oftentimes can lead to opportunities and potential jobs. So those are the 4 things that we're going to do today. Afterwards, I'll take any questions, but as we're going, just feel free to drop questions in the chat, and or you know what, this is pretty informal. Go ahead and just unmute and pause and jump in whenever you've got a question. So here we go. We're starting with career goals, talking about what you want to be doing 6 to 12 months coming out of Lambda School. And to do that, I want to get into, what your goals are, and talk about why this is important. It's obviously it's difficult to hit a target if you don't know what it is. You may finish, you may have finished high school or finished college or some other educational environment and not really known what to do next. What we want to make sure that you get out of today and out of the next couple of weeks is that you know what to do next. You know what you want so that you can go after it. And the clearer your goals are, the easier it's going to be to make a clear plan to land a position that fills those goals. So, once you've identified where you want to go, you can design the short-term goals that will help you get there. So I want to take a minute to think. I'm going to pause. I'm going to expect you to share with the group in a minute. But I want to pause for 90 seconds or so, and just I want you to think about where you want to be in 3 to 5 years or 2 to 4 years, kind of that mid-range career goal, what you want coming out of Lambda School. So go ahead and take, again, 90 seconds, 2 minutes to just think about that. Obviously, it's a big topic. You could think about that for a long time and change your goals as you go, but just to help frame the conversation for the rest of our time today, take a few minutes to do that. All right, who's willing to share a couple of thoughts about where they want to be in 3 to 5 years?
I could share. This is Ryan.
Please do.
So mine are a little maybe lofty, but I just like to put all my thoughts out there. But so 3 to 4, I said a senior making over $100,000 a year, working for an interesting company whose mission I like. Maybe going into management or leading a software team. And I'd also like to have completed my bachelor's in CS by that point and maybe be working towards a master's.
Awesome. Um, that's a lot of stuff, right? You mentioned management, you mentioned, project lead, you mentioned senior developer, you mentioned extra study on the side, um, and so that's awesome, and all of that is super doable in the 3 to 5 year time frame. Well, I don't know where you are in your bachelor's degree, but the rest of that is doable in that time.
Yeah,
Um, and
halfway. So
what?
I said, yeah, you're right. I'm about halfway, so hopefully that's achievable.
Yeah. And so what's important is those different aspects are all things that should help you think about what it is that you want to be doing in the short term to get you there, right? Um, each of those things requires, to get your bachelor's degree, you're going to need to go and potentially reapply to school or sign up to classes or get into the program. To become a senior developer, you're obviously going to need to work on high level projects and get them into production and deal with scaling issues and optimizations and live through the lifespan of a product. And you're obviously going to need to keep learning. Everyone here is doing awesome, but there's so much more to continue learning that you will keep learning as you build more projects and work with other people. So I want us to have kind of this mindset of, 3 to 5 years from now, where do I want to be, and what should I be doing out of Lambda School? What do I want out of a job coming out of Lambda School to be able to get there? One thing I want to point out, for most students, one important step to reaching your long-term goals is just to continue learning. And, obviously you want to be making a livable wage by then. So what you should be doing is optimizing for learning in your first job coming out of Lambda School. And just note that it's worth taking a lower salary today to continue to learn from great senior developers. So you look at these numbers up here on the screen. What do they both add up to?
140.
Yeah, 140. Who would love to make 140,000 over the next 2 years?
Me.
I think we all would, right? Like that would be great. And this is not me promising you that this is going to happen. Obviously, there's a lot of variables that go into that. But these are two different scenarios that lead to the same outcome over 2 years. And if you add the third year, actually the first scenario is better. I've worked with many students coming out of code schools that land positions. And I've seen students who optimize for the higher salary coming out, and they end up getting stuck because maybe they're getting that higher salary coming out, and they're like the only developer on at a startup, and they're stuck. They're not around people that they can learn from. I've also seen people that take this approach, the first approach, and they're willing to take a lower salary than other offers that they've gotten. But because of that, they're taking the lower salary to work at the right place and to continue learning and investing in themselves. And it more than pays off down the road. Year 2, you might double your salary. And it's just something I want you to keep in mind as you're evaluating different options and looking at different open positions is, will I be able to learn here? because if you learn, then you're going to get better and you're going to be compensated better. If you don't, then you're going to be stuck, or you're stunting your growth as a developer. Okay, I want to talk about 3 potential kind of 3 to 5 year goals. Ryan shared a few great examples. We could use those. I'm going to talk through a couple of examples here, but then I want you to think about how this applies to what your goals were. For a lot of us, it's make a livable wage. But make sure that it's increasing, make sure that it's growing over time, just to support your family, support your lifestyle, support the things that you want to do. That's pretty straightforward, sensible goal. I'm sure most of us share in here. That probably applies to everyone. The next one probably does not apply to everyone, but may apply to some of you, is move to San Francisco and work for one of the big 4. Work for Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, someone like that. And you can imagine that takes kind of different planning. If your goal in 3 to 5 years is to be able to work remotely, be able to travel the world while you're working, or even just be able to stay at home while you're working, that's a different type of a path that you should plan for in the next 6 to 12 months so that you can be able to do that over time. Just to talk through this first example, what should you do in the next 3 to 6 months to make that possible? Go ahead, and just a couple of you go ahead and unmute and share what you think.
Definitely learn as much of, well, at least for number 2, I would say definitely learn as much about data structures and algorithms as humanly possible, because that is definitely going to be a part of getting in to that, something like that. So
yeah. Okay, so let's zoom in on number 2. Let's focus on this one. So moving to San Francisco, or basically work for one of the big companies. I love what you just said. You've got to focus on what those companies care about. Those companies are hiring at the most competitive levels of computer science in many cases, and they want people that know their fundamentals. Algorithms and data structures is a great example of that. What else would you want to make sure that you're doing in the next 3 to 6 months to make sure that you're on the path to work for one of those big companies?
I would say probably know about the company's like their mission statement in there, what they may be expected from you as an employee.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely research you can be doing now to set you up to be able to work there later. I spent about 18 months working for Apple. I've followed Apple for about a decade before I worked there. That's one of the reasons I ended up there, is because I was such a fan of their products and things that they had built. And certainly my knowledge of the company from the outside played into me being able to get a position there when they came and recruited me to come. So, and that's true at all of those big companies. What do you think? What types of jobs or opportunities would you want to take in the next 3 to 6 months, or your first job coming out of Lambda School that would help set you up for that second goal there?
maybe trying to work for a similar a company with a similar mission. Maybe like, say you wanted to work for Google, maybe DuckDuckGo is hiring juniors, or and you could learn about search engine optimization and stuff like that. Or if you wanted to work at Facebook, you could try a newer, smaller social media company, maybe something like that.
Yeah, that's a great approach. Is kind of working in the same field of products, not necessarily direct competitor. You don't have to necessarily work for direct competitors, but looking at, similar industries, similar goals, similar products. That's a great thing to think about. What do you think you should avoid? What would you need to avoid to be able to, go and move to San Francisco and work for one of these big companies?
Maybe getting stuck in a job where you're not necessarily, because all of them are kind of at the forefront of innovation. Maybe you want to make sure you're not getting stuck in a job where you're just you're either always working with legacy code and not really kind of keeping your skill set up to date via work.
Yeah. I like what you said. You don't want to get stuck in a job. You also don't want to get stuck in your skills. I would even just say you don't want to get pigeonholed into a specific technology or framework. You want to keep expanding your skill set and make sure that you try to find a position that opens you up to that. Working remotely is another one. We could talk through that. I have a lot to cover, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about working remotely yet. Here, I do talk about remote work later, but as far as setting goals, I just want you to be aware of what yours are as we're talking today and as we have these future conversations. So what I'd like you to do is we're going to take 4 or 5 minutes. I'd like you to write down kind of 2 different descriptions of where you want your career to be in 3 to 5 years. Similar to what we were thinking about earlier, just write it down. And maybe, I'm guessing some of you thought of 2 or 3 different examples of where you'd like to be in 3 to 5 years. So go ahead and write those down as kind of different scenarios. And then for each one of those, write down 2 or 3 short-term goals that will help open those doors. So, what type of position you would want to look for now, what's maybe the next technology that you would want to learn outside of Lambda School, that type of thing. So again, we'll take 4 or 5 minutes and then dive back in. I'll add one thing. If you feel comfortable with it, I'd love if you could drop your different scenarios and your goals that go with those into the Slack channel, so we can kind of see how other people are thinking and go from there. There's no judgment. No one's going to be complaining about what it is that you want. Just here to see some additional examples of how different students are thinking. go ahead and take 30 seconds or so to wrap up. Thanks, Julian, for sharing in the Slack channel. Would love to see, yeah, Jason, you too. Would love to see a few more in there. Awesome. Yeah, feel free to spend some more time on that. I know it's a lot to think about, and you know, we're doing it kind of spur of the moment here, but this is a great exercise for you just as you, you know, you're making decisions about what types of positions you want to get into. I recognize that for some of you, your goal may be as simple as, I need a job so I can pay rent next month, and that's okay. That's okay if that's your goal, and we're going to help you do that. But eventually, hope you're able to think bigger picture and think beyond that, so that you can continue to be satisfied in this career. Okay. This next section is mostly just a discussion about different types of work environments. My guess is you're going to have a lot of questions here. Feel free to drop them in Slack, or again, just unmute and interrupt. But our goal here is we're gonna talk about comparing and contrasting we're just going to talk about different work environments: internships versus full time, big companies versus small companies, remote versus in person. And I want you to think about kind of which best fits your short-term goals that will lead to your longer-term goals. So first, I want to talk about, you know, internship versus contracts versus you know, full-time position. And I'm going to make what may be a surprising argument that you should try, unless you're offered a great full-time position pretty soon out of class. You may be interested in looking at internship positions, primarily because of that learning experience that you get out of it. And it's a great way to hone your skills, and then your first full-time position will potentially pay more as a result. So just quick summary of each. Obviously, an internship is usually a time-limited experience working on a team. Most internships should be paid, though the amount may be lower than a contract or a full-time position. Coming out of Lambda School, if you were to get into an internship, you could expect, you know, between $15–25 an hour for a paid internship, kind of depending on where you live and the company and all that stuff. Your job at an internship is to prove that you work hard, to ship stuff regularly, and to learn from the developers on staff. You should soak in as much as you can while building your experience at an internship. Many internships lead to full-time positions. It's almost a trial opportunity for the company. So you can get into an internship, prove that you know your stuff, that you can do the work, and then you know, hopefully get an offer. Contracts, I've had students ask me about them, which is why I included them here. Contracts provide the most flexibility, but they're also, you know, the most risky, particularly as a new developer. Many developers have tried contracting at one point in their career, and a lot of them love the freedom and autonomy that contracting can bring. I would say this is a great option to try later in your career, but probably not what you want to jump into first. Unless you're working, you know, I mentioned this before, and this plays into contracts. One of your most important goals is to continue learning as fast as possible. And unless you're working on a team, you won't be able to learn from developers that are more experienced on contract typically. That said, if you do want to get into contracting, contracts for new developers will probably be somewhere between $20 and $30 an hour. And you can easily work up to over $100 an hour with more experience and time. If you are going to go down the contract route, make sure that you work with a lawyer or use a website like Clerky or something like that to help you write your contracts. And last, full-time positions. Obviously, this is probably what most of you are looking for and what people think of when they think about getting into the field. Some of you may need to take the path through an internship before landing a full-time developer job. My little brother is actually going through this process right now. He is about to finish at another school learning iOS development, and I've spent basically 3 months convincing him that an internship is the right path to getting a full-time job for him. So that may be the case for many of you, but once you get into a full-time position, you can expect salaries to range anywhere from 40 to 80,000. I know that's a wide range. But just depends on your experience, where you're at, and other related skills that you have to the business. For example, if you have graphic design background or say a background in video production and the company needs that, they may be willing to pay you more for the combination of skills that you bring. So just once again, if you're debating, optimize for learning, optimize, salary is important. I totally get that, but optimize for learning, and you'll be much better off in the long run. Any questions about internships versus contracts versus full-time before I move on to kind of big companies versus small companies?
Maybe this is off topic. We could talk about it later. But as far as like internship and getting hired, are we going to be discussing kind of the difference between like a junior dev position and what to expect and versus a senior position? Because as I kind of understand it, I'm doing an internship and they're not expecting me to be a master of my craft, and a lot of it is getting familiar with their code base, and a senior developer kind of walking me through development stuff and kind of giving me little breadcrumbs to run with. But that's kind of, I would expect a contract position, I'd need to be at least, at that level of mastery to say, I can command this salary and give you these benefits. Whereas an internship that might lead to full-time might be something more where they'd be taking someone on in order to complete their education, whether they have a CS degree or they're out of a boot camp.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair distinction. But if you're looking into contract work, people are going to expect you to be more independent and self-driven and able to finish things on your own. That's one of the biggest distinctions between a junior developer or a mid-level developer or a senior developer, is how independent you are, how able you are to take a description of a project or a feature and plan out and execute on a development plan to build that feature or product. So if you can do that on your own, without referencing a lot of documentation or help articles or mentors, you're working your way towards being mid-level or senior. There are other distinctions. Some companies rate the distinction between junior, mid-level, and senior as like the amount of time you've been working in the field. So there's different distinctions, but my rule of thumb is it's really about how autonomous or independent you are in being able to build production level software. Yeah, and contracts are going to expect you to be higher on that scale. Internships, obviously, they're expecting that you're coming in. This is more of a learning experience for you, but also in any of these positions, the people you're working with expect you to deliver. You know, when you talk about something, when you talk about a feature and how you might implement it, they expect you to go and build it and come back with you know, a working product or close to it. One thing I'll say is I've heard about students that go into an internship and they're assigned a task and they want to be so independent, they want to tackle it on their own, that they don't ever ask for help. And so they may be stuck on something that maybe should take half a day. They may take a week or 2 weeks because they don't want to ask for help. And I would say, don't be afraid to ask for help. You shouldn't ask for help on every little thing, but don't be afraid to ask for help when you're in kind of an internship position, or even just any of these situations. It's worse to take forever and struggle on your own than just asking for help when the opportunity's there and available to you.
So on that same note, if I could
Yeah.
just interject real quick, I'm also doing an internship. My experience has kind of been the opposite of Patrick's, in that it's a small company. They're one of your, you know, YC cohort members, and they, you know, they're very small. They have a really small team. It's basically just 2 guys, and one of them is kind of the CTO, one of them's kind of the you know, the founder or whatnot, and they don't really have necessarily a full-on engineering team. And so my experience has been very independent, and I have asked a lot. I've tried to ask a lot of questions, and I've kind of gotten a bit of, you know, we can help you with direction, but I don't have time for technical questions right now, kind of deal. So I don't know, just on that, I guess wanted to see what your feedback on that kind of a situation was, on how to approach that.
So my question for you, this is not advice for how to succeed in that internship, but just something to think about beyond the internship, is that a great environment for you to grow significantly?
I have learned a ton so far, because I've had to, you know, force myself to do a lot of research on things that I don't know. I have learned a ton, but yeah, for me personally, you know, it's definitely not what I was hoping for, exactly what you were talking about, you know, like learn directly under a senior and be able to, you know, just go, hey, you know, how do I figure out how to do this thing over here, or this thing's broken and I can't figure it out. But
yeah, so I'll give you my advice on how to potentially make that better. But first, I want to just say, sometimes that's the way it is, right? You can take everything we talk about and say, all right, I'm going to optimize for learning, and I'm willing to take a lower salary to be able to do that and work in the right place. And at the end of the day, the place that you land, it's going to be you, and that may happen. And my suggestion for that is, make sure that you are involved in both online and offline communities where you're building relationships of people who are willing to mentor you. So that happens inside of Lambda School, but also some of the most important relationships that I built in my early mobile development career was going to a local iOS developer meetup. They met weekly, and they at a coffee shop, and then they also meet monthly where they do presentations and stuff like that. And there are places like that all around the country. Meetup.com is a great place to find those. I don't think this is going to mess up my presentation. You guys, Julian, you're on video still. Can you see meetup.com on the screen? Thumbs up. Cool. So you can see, you know, let's just search JavaScript within 50 miles of Charleston. Okay, no JavaScript meetups. How about web? Web developers. So I was on Calendar. It helps to look for groups because then you can see the groups that are actually meeting and then go in, right? So Charleston, you've got a Python meetup or a .NET meetup or a Linux meetup. You can go in and, Women in Tech meetup, and you can go in and see, their calendars, the different events that they're hosting, different events that have been there. You can see people in the community that are going to those. So meetup.com is a great resource to kind of maintain an offline network, and you can go to those people for help as needed. So that's one avenue.
Great, thank you.
We got a question in Slack. It says, could you talk about how likely a company would be to hire an intern immediately after the internship is over, assuming the intern does well during the internship? And then, sometimes internships run in cycles during the summer and then open up hiring months later. So in my experience, smaller companies that have internships are usually using the internship as an evaluation to hire workers from, hire some of the interns. And that usually happens pretty soon after in smaller companies. Larger companies do have more of a cycle where it's like, okay, we have 10 interns, or, you get into kind of Big Four territory and we've got hundreds of interns that are here for the summer, and we may or may not be hiring for those teams or those positions right away. So it just kind of depends on the company, but I would say oftentimes companies that have internship programs are using that as a tool to evaluate future talent. So it's really important that in an internship you do everything you can to prove yourself to be able to work there. And if not, if they aren't hiring, at the very least, you will have a great recommendation from your team and your manager from the internship moving forward. Other questions about these three scenarios before we move on? Okay, feel free to ask me anytime. I'm sure questions will come up. We also you'll get introduced on Thursday to the career services team. We've hired two awesome people that have been working in this industry, helping junior developers get jobs for years. And so excited to have them. You'll get to meet them on Thursday, and they can obviously help answer any of these questions as well. So I want to talk about big company versus small company, and also maybe throw startups in there as well. And just note that your first job is going to have an outsized impact on the rest of your career. So obviously you need to take the first offer that makes sense for you, but pay particular attention to the pros and cons of different types of companies. Specifically, I want to talk about team, compensation, and the environment at startups, small companies, and big companies. And these are all pretty loose terms, and I'm talking at a very high level generally, so you can ask specific questions if you'd like. But first I want to talk about startups, and just say, from a team perspective, you're usually, in early stage startups, you're working on a small team. And that can be kind of more intimate and engaging, good opportunity for you to learn and build relationships. And you'll likely have more influence on project direction and features and things like that. So startups are generally looking for generalists or people who can do lots of different things well. And so if you like that, then that may be a good environment for you. Compensation at a startup usually includes equity or stock options, but will likely miss other benefits like 401k or life or disability insurance or maternity leave, or things like that. So, and oftentimes, because part of the compensation is in equity or stock, the salary amount is oftentimes lower. So just make sure that you understand the value of equity and understand that it may or may not ever be worth anything when considering it as compensation. Startups are busy, they're changing. Oftentimes they're more casual, but they're very demanding when you work in a startup. You can expect more risk. Company may run out of money. The company may need someone else in your position with more experience. So sometimes there's turnover, there's fast growth. So that's kind of something you can expect in a startup. All of the things that you've seen and experienced here at Lambda School, you all as students have seen Lambda School go from 2 people, 2 employees to over 20 employees just in your time here, and all of the changes that have happened during that time otherwise. So you can use Lambda School as a measure for the type of change that can happen rapidly in a startup. I want to make a point here that kind of goes with what Ryan was saying. My recommendation is that you should not work at a startup if you'll be the first or only developer on the team. That's not forever, that's just for your first job. You don't want to be the first or only developer on the team. You'll miss out on so many important lessons of working with, you know, someone more senior, and it can also be very challenging to deliver on the high expectations of the startup without having that mentorship or other people to lean on. Questions about startups before I talk about small businesses? So Julian asked, with 75% of venture-backed startups failing, how valuable is equity? Equity is a crazy thing. It can be worth, you know, if you were in the first 100 employees at Facebook, you know, you made life-changing money from the equity. In many cases, your equity is worth $0, and you're never able to sell it. You know, there are people working here at Lambda School. All of the employees here have some sort of equity in the company. And if Lambda School does really well, then that may pay off. Otherwise, the equity was worth nothing, right? Any company that you're looking at, it's really tough to value the equity if it's not something that you can sell. So, you know, if you go and work for a big company right now, like say you go and work for Amazon now, part of your compensation is in equity. They give you stock options or restricted stock units. And that may be, you know, 40% of your income is in stock. But when you work there, that's not a problem because you can sell Amazon equity just on the stock market. It's really easy to do. Nobody can sell, you know, Lambda School equity today because Lambda School is not a publicly traded company. So it's just something to consider when thinking about you know, how valuable is equity. There's just a lot that goes into that, and in the end it goes down to, are you willing to, is it something you believe in and something that you believe will do well? And my advice would be, if you get an offer that has equity attached to it and you can afford to do so, talk with someone who's been through that situation before, or potentially hire a lawyer to help you think through that process. Great question. Other questions about startups, working for startups? Okay. Small businesses, my distinction between a small business and a startup, it would just be, this is not like a political statement or anything like that. I'm just trying to, my distinction would be that a startup is a company that's not necessarily trying to grow really big, really fast. They're generally a little more established. They've been around for a while, and their size is pretty consistent. Yeah, or the fact that they're not using investor funding to grow rapidly. In a small business, teams are usually more established. There's a little more longevity. People have been there or will be there for a long time. I would include like contract development shops in this small businesses group. If you are working for a contract shop or a dev shop, your project may change every couple of months. If it's not a contract shop and you're at a small company, you may be working on the same kind of smaller project, maintaining it, doing bug fixes, stuff like that, for a long time. And you may be wearing, kind of like in the startup, you may be wearing many hats. If it's a small, if it's 10 to 15 people, if you're a developer there, you may also be like part IT guy or girl, and you may be the one that gets called over to fix the printer, stuff like that. So generally more established teams with people who've been there for a while and will be there for a while. Compensation is usually more salary and benefits than a startup, but less than a big company. If you become a top performer at a small company or a small business, you can usually work out pretty significant raises while staying at the company. Whereas in a startup or a big company, they may have very set in stone procedures for getting raises. And one of the things that you'll find is early in your career, year to year, your salary can be drastically increased. So if you're going to be at a company for 2 to 3 years and you're in your first job, you would hope that it would be the type of company that will adjust your compensation accordingly, rather than on a set, percentage schedule. The environment at a small company, it may feel a little more like family, for better or worse. You're generally working with the same small group of people day after day. And if you like those people, that may be great. And if you don't like those people, then that may be grating and frustrating after a while. Small companies pay very close attention to the bottom line. Expenses and travel and stuff like that may be less common there. And in small companies, my experience is that many things are done because they've always been done that way, or based on somebody's gut instinct, rather than designed systems or decision-making processes. So if that's something that bothers you, that may be something to consider. I would say if you can find a small business with a talented senior developer, you should do whatever it takes to get there and learn and prove your value. Great. Small businesses can be great places to work. Any questions about small businesses before I talk about big companies? Okay. Big companies, you're likely going to be very specialized. What you're expected to do may be like a small piece of a small product, and that's your full-time position. You'll work cross-functionally, which means you'll work with a project manager, you'll work with a designer, you'll work with different teams that have their expertise. And so you get to work with more people, but also with more people comes more meetings and systems and bureaucracy, which is fine to some people and can be frustrating to others. There will be at these huge companies, there's going to be lifers that they were there 20 years ago and they're going to be there for the next 20 years, and they'll finish their career there. And working with those people, I used to work in public education, and sometimes the more experienced people were great to work with, and sometimes they were kind of just coasting until retirement. And those are two very different types of people to work with. And when you talk about a big company, you're generally going to find more of those people that are kind of coasting towards retirement. Compensation is usually the highest salary and most comprehensive benefits package at a big company. Amazon can pay more than a startup, just the way that it is. The environment, obviously, it's going to vary widely depending on your team. When you're at a big company, you can oftentimes transfer teams within the company. So for example, at Apple, I have people on my team that transfer to other teams pretty regularly. So that's a common way to get different experience within the same company and keeping the same benefits and stuff like that. So that's kind of my high-level overview of the different kind of environment, compensation, and team variables at different size companies. What questions do you have before I move on? Okay. Last I want to talk about for this, I want to talk about remote versus in person. Can I just get, let's see, Polly. I'm dropping a Polly in the channel, and let's see, multiple choice one time. Yes, no. If you can just jump into the Slack channel real quick and give a yes or no on the Polly so that I can see.
I'm confused as what yes or no mean to an either or question.
Great question. Do you want to work remotely is what I mean to ask there. Sorry, that's my first time using Poly Live, so should have thought through the question phrasing and the options there better. But so far, it's a pretty even mix of people that want to do each, and there's a maybe and sometimes or potentially. So kind of all over the map, but worth talking about, digging into. We can spend as much time as we want on this asking questions. I have done both pretty extensively, so would love to talk about it. So some of this, well, yeah, I'll just start with remote. Working remotely is a dream scenario for many people, but it's also challenging for many employers to consider doing remote work right now. I think that's changing, but there's still many companies who won't do it, especially for new developers or people early on in their career. So it's most likely that your first position is going to be in person. That doesn't mean that's going to be the case for everyone. There are remote positions for junior developers out there. So just to tell you, working remotely requires you to be just an excellent communicator. It requires you to be super self-motivated and highly disciplined about doing your work. I have, even here at Lambda School, gotten rid of remote employees that weren't disciplined about doing their work. And I've done that at previous companies in the past. So if you're self-motivated, if you're an excellent communicator, then remote opportunities may be available to you. I will say working remotely can be challenging. If the team that you join is not all working remotely, then you'll find that you aren't really involved in decision making, or that you may be assigned less desirable work. You also may find that working remotely is lonely, and working at here at the beginning of the career, working remotely may make it harder for you to learn from other developers at the company. So that said, if the whole team is set up to work remotely, it can be a great environment. Almost everyone at Lambda School works remotely, and because it's set up that way, everyone uses Zoom, everyone uses Slack, everyone uses their calendar, everyone's pretty good about that, and so we're able to make it work. But it's hard when not the whole team is. As an example, when I was working at Apple, there was a woman on my team. We were in San Jose, and there was a woman on my team that was in Los Angeles. And she very often got the work assigned to her that nobody else on the team wanted to do. And that was just 'cause she wasn't there. She wasn't there in the meeting. She wasn't making the decisions. And calling in on a conference line is very different than being there in person. You don't get to have, kind of the conversations during lunch or walking around the office or meeting around a conference room. That can all be important stuff to building relationships and getting to choose the work that you want to work on. So we can talk more about that, but I want to contrast it to kind of working in person. I think most developers, most new developers should try to work on an established software team in person, again, alongside mid-level and senior developers. It's just easier to build relationships with potential mentors in the company. Walking over to a desk or meeting around a conference table or a whiteboard or eating lunch with the people you work with can really help build those relationships. It's also easier to be engaged in, with the project at all of the stages of planning and development because you're there, you're getting the broader exposure to the entire process. So yeah, the big variables to me in deciding which ones to work on is, are you going to get the interesting work? Is the rest of the team working remotely? Are you going to be involved in the process? And if you are, then working remotely can be really great. I'm guessing, based on how many people want to do remote work, that we've got questions. So I'm just going to open it up here. I want to hear your questions on, comparing remote versus in-person work. You can drop them in Slack or just unmute.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
I'm just asking, what questions do you have about working remotely versus working in person?
One of the questions I have, maybe this is off topic, but in the internship I'm working with, I do have some difficulty with my old 2012 Airbook and its intermittent camera and the ability for my processor to even make updates to the big project I'm working on. I'm just kind of wondering, for remote positions, I'm assuming they're going to want you to have the latest and greatest and fastest and best, computer available to you. But it seems like if you get hired at a big company, they're providing you hardware, and just kind of wondering about those kinds of differences between the two positions.
Yeah, I would say it is really important when you're working remotely that you have the equipment that you need to be able to contribute, right? Here at Lambda School, when we hire a new instructor, we get them a new laptop, we get them a monitor if they need it, we get them a microphone, we get them a webcam, and we get them, a drawing tablet if that's something that they would use while teaching. So it is really important that you have the equipment to be able to do your job. That said, most companies, if they are hiring you as an employee, will assign you equipment and send that out to you. So whether you're working remotely or in person, you're going to get a work laptop, or desktop, but probably a work laptop. They should be making sure that you have all of the tools that you need to get the job done.
Cool, thanks.
Julian just asked, how likely are companies to pay for relocation? Depends on the company. Usually a job listing is going to say relocation, whether they are open to relocate. Well, they're always open to relocation if you're willing to move there, but whether they pay for relocation or not. I would say the bigger the company, the more likely they are to pay for relocation. Basically anywhere in the Bay Area. Well, that's not necessarily true. I'll stick with the bigger the company, the more likely they are to pay. But that's a great question. Okay, any other questions before we move on?
Is it a common thing to like have an in-person position, but just, like maybe take a day off and work from home, or maybe not spend your whole day there and, after 5 o'clock go home and do some work? Is that?
I would say yes, that's pretty common.
Yeah.
One day, 2 days a week remotely is pretty common in this field. Hours, it really depends on the culture of the company. I have a friend specifically that I'm thinking of that he wakes up early and works in the morning, like works from 6 to 8, and then goes to the gym from 8 to 10, and then goes into work. And so he actually arrives to the office pretty late. And that's not arrangements like that are not terribly uncommon. Yeah, and remote work a couple times a week is also fairly common. Great question. Any others? Okay. What I want to do is I want you to take a minute to, well, let's come to here. I'd like you to just focus on this first one. Take 2-3 minutes, write down your preferences for the type of role and company that you'd like to start with, and how that relates to where you'd want to be in 2 to 3 years. So specifically the size of the company, the type of role, and whether it's remote or in person. And again, kind of think about those in relation to the goals that you wrote earlier. So go ahead and take 2 minutes to do that first one, and then we're gonna do a thing in Slack. I'll post I'll explain in a couple minutes what we're gonna do with this second and third one. So just go ahead and do number one. Again, we'll take 2-3 minutes for that. go ahead and take one more minute, and then we'll move on to the next part. Okay, go ahead and pause where you're at. Reading a couple of the comments in Slack and a couple of direct messages I got. I want to talk real quick about this. A little bit of talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, and also just a little bit about how that relates to what we're talking about right now. First, these goals that you're writing down, these thoughts that you have, your preferences, these are all things to work towards. I am by no means guaranteeing that by writing these down, you're going to get your dream position, 72 hours after finishing Lambda school. But I do think it's important when thinking about your career and what you want to do to make conscious, intentional decisions and plans, and that will help drive your decision making and where you end up. So that said, I also want to talk about imposter syndrome, which is pretty much everyone in this field goes through this at different times, where they don't feel like they know enough to get a job, or they don't feel like they know enough to work on a certain type of project or to work at a certain company. And I just want to say, you've all learned a lot, and you've put in a lot of hard work, and there are opportunities out there for all of you. And as you continue to learn and grow and make conscious decisions, the more doors are going to open up to you. So yes, could you be better than you are today? Sure. In a month, you're going to be better than you are today. And that will open more doors for you than where you are right now. The same is true for every month in the past, for the past 6 months since you started, and probably before that too. So everyone feels that way. It's a common thing. Look up imposter syndrome. And also, while we're on it, there's another thing I want to talk about, just called the Dunning-Kruger effect. I was hoping there would be a graphic or something there. Here we go. So right here, this is also a process that many of you are going through, which is, right when you're learning something new, you feel really confident about it, and overly confident. Your confidence outweighs your competence, as it says here, or your skill. And as you get better, the way you feel about where you are is going to change. You all are probably somewhere here on this downslope of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you're getting better, but your confidence is going down, because as you get better, you recognize all of the things that you don't know, right? All of the things that are out there that you don't know, but you are getting better. And like I said, there are opportunities out there no matter where you're at. That confidence goes back up as you become an expert in the field or in a particular skill set. So just be aware of this Dunning-Kruger effect, but also be aware of imposter syndrome, which is you may feel like you are doing worse than you actually are. Okay. Both of those took quite a bit longer than I was hoping. So let's get into actually finding these open job positions. There's tons of places to look online to find open positions. We'll talk a lot about how you should be using your own personal networks as well. But I wanna talk about where you can find open positions and then use your personal networks to land those positions. So yeah, just want you to be familiar with what's out there. Here's just a tiny sample of all of the different places that you can find jobs online. LinkedIn is probably the biggest and most common. We're going to spend some time on Thursday talking about resumes and LinkedIn. They're very similar topics. One common one in kind of startup land is Angel List. A lot of companies list positions there. For example, Lambda School has Angel List listings for open instructor positions. Company career pages is a big one. If you want to work at a specific company, and it's a bigger company, oftentimes they're going to have their own careers page, right? If you want to go and work at Microsoft, you just search Microsoft careers. They've got their own whole subdomain dedicated to it. And you're going to be able to search for awesome, as they say, opportunities based on location. Okay. Front end developer. Okay. And you're going to see, all of the listings in different locations and different descriptions, and you're going to see, you're going to apply directly on the site. So bigger companies have those career pages. Another popular kind of startup one is Hacker News, Who's Hiring. So Lambda School went through Y Combinator, which is a kind of boot camp for startups. And Y Combinator has a forum called Hacker News, and every month they have a Who's Hiring thread that shows all of the startups that are hiring for positions. So that could be another place to look. Craigslist and local classifieds are other places to find open positions. There's some best practices about what to do and what not to do, particularly when looking at Craigslist and local classifieds, but those are other options. I include local classifieds because there's plenty of places where Craigslist is not as widely used. So for example, here in Utah, there's a place called KSL, and their job listings there's way more job listings on KSL in Utah than there are on Craigslist. Okay, so I include that because depending on where you are, Craigslist may not be a great option. But lots of places. Where else can you all think of to look for open positions online?
There's a new feature. I can't talk about this too much because I signed a piece of paper, but I've actually been working directly in this specific domain for my internship. I've done a ton of research. The absolute best resource out there right now is actually very little known, I've come to realize, because I talked to somebody else about it the other day and they didn't know anything about it. But Google now, if you type jobs into Google and then type software engineer and then type a location, Google has actually integrated an incredible web crawler. that integrates pretty much all of the best places to find software engineering jobs. And it puts them in order. It's got salaries. It's really amazing, actually.
So you just said Google like this.
And then if you click on that little modal that pops up, it's amazing.
Here we go. I have never seen this.
Yeah, nobody knows about it yet. I don't know how that's possible.
I did notice it when I searched the Microsoft jobs earlier, or Microsoft careers, right? And it came up, and that was the first time I saw it. But I like that it says where, right? Near, and it's aggregating from Glassdoor, LinkedIn.
It's all of them. It does Angel List. It does
all right.
All the best ones.
Well, forget everything that I said. Use this. And look at this. Turn on email alerts for this search. That's awesome.
And even if you keep scrolling down, it'll give Glassdoor in the actual listing window to the right. It sometimes will give salary information or. Yep.
That's cool. That's very cool. I'm glad you brought this up.
I'm trying to create kind of my own right now, but we'll see how that goes.
Well, good luck competing with Google. I wish to everybody who is competing with Google. Yeah, titles, locations. This is great. I should scrap everything and just talk about this, right? Full-time, contractor, part-time, internship, location. I'm sure there's remote anywhere. There you go. Okay, so this is a great tool. I would start here. And my guess is it obviates a little bit of what else I was going to show you. So right here, you can see there's a save button. One of the things I want you to be able to do is when you find a position, I want you to be able to log it somewhere and track kind of your progress through the application process. So it looks like here on Google, there's the save button, and I'm sure if you just come back to how do I get there directly? careers.google.com.
There is no direct path to it. It's like this weird dynamically created modal that only pops up when you actually type that into the search bar. It's not even, you can't go directly to the site.
I feel like I should be able to link to this saved thing. I believe you though. I'll look more into it. But you can come back and see the things that you've saved, and that's great. And it's got an apply button, so you go there and apply for the position. That is great. And for searching for open positions, this is cool. What I want to show you for this portion of the lesson is how you can use something like Google Sheets or Trello or Airtable. Airtable is a tool we're using a lot internally here to kind of track your progress through this. So I've created just an example here in Airtable that I'm dropping into Slack of a tracker that you can use to when you're job hunting, put them everywhere. When you're applying for jobs, you can go through and batch through applying for those jobs. And then this will help you keep track of where you scheduled interviews, how you've reached out to people, and things like that. So that link should give you read access to this, and you should be able to click this arrow up here and duplicate this into your own account if you create your own account. Jobs, search terms, cool. Let's see. Let me give you a different link if that link's not working. There you go. Use that second link that I dropped in there. I'll delete the first one. And that should give you access to view this, and then you should be able to duplicate it and make your own copy. Go ahead and take a minute to do that, and then I'll talk through how you might want to use it. Okay, so basically, I mean, it's fairly straightforward. Most of you have used, have used spreadsheets, things like that. This is not a spreadsheet, this is a database, but looks very similar. Here on the left, you would just add the company name, company description, any of your notes about the company. I like, I added this field for adding your interest level, so you can, 1 through 4 stars, mark how interested you are in the company. You can choose the size of the company. If that matters to you, you can delete that field if it doesn't. You can log the location, the link to applying for it, and then we'll talk more about this contact stuff. But basically, one of the things that I want you to get out of today is that the most important part of applying to a job is having someone on the inside. You've maybe heard the saying, "It's not about what you know, it's about who you know." The biggest thing that's going to help you get jobs is going to be, either having or building a relationship with someone inside the company that can get your resume to the right people or get your application to the right people, or can be kind of encouraging your name through the process. So that's what that's there for. And then one of the things that it's got is here on the far right, status. This is where you can update kind of where you're at. You've got applied, interview scheduled, interviewed, passed, meaning the company passed on you, or the company accepted you or is about to send you an offer. You can change these statuses to whatever you want. But one thing I want to show you, in Airtable, you can view your data in different ways. And one of the ways that you can view it is in a Kanban view, which is like Trello. And so you can see kind of where you are at in the process. And your goal should be to work things from the left to the right. And so if you go and, Letter Tracker Inc., you fill out an application there, you can put it here. So that, if you get every company that you're interested in applying for moved into applied, then there are no other applications for you to work through. If a card is stuck here and applied for a long time, then you can actually, you can go back and check in with your contact at the company and say, hey, I want to see, did my application get to the right person, stuff like that. So you can move these across the board, and that's what you want to do. Obviously, you hope they don't land here and passed, but that's bound to happen for some people. All right, just checking Slack here real quick. Ryan, seems like you like Airtable. Yeah, Excel spreadsheets are great for many things, but I like a lot about Airtable. Again, we're using Airtable for a ton of things internally right now, and more so in the future. Shotgun method. I'm going to say I want you to not, well, I don't want you to do the shotgun method, which is just, spray and pray. What I do want you to do is apply to many places, but also do it right. If you just send a resume somewhere, almost guaranteed it just ends up in the garbage. If it's a printed off resume, the actual garbage, and if it's just email or somewhere, then it's just going to go into someone's, some folder in someone's email. That's why having a person on the inside is so important, which is the last thing that we'll talk about in our time here. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. Julian just asked, so search LinkedIn for employees. We'll talk about that. That's the last portion of our presentation today. But anyway, great tool to keep track of this. Use this as you go through the process. And what I actually want us to do is I want you to take, we are nearing the end of our time. Are you guys, is anyone not okay if we go until like 2:30? If we go for about another 45 minutes to an hour?
I have no problem with it.
Okay, I know it's long, but I'd like us to take a little bit of time to actually apply this. So cool. So this is all being recorded. I'll post it later. So if you have to take off, that's okay. I want you to take 15 minutes right now, and I want you to use that Google search tool that we were using to find at least 3 leads of local companies near you that are hiring for positions that fit your skill set. And I want you to add them to your tracker. So I'm going to mute and stop my video, and I'll come back about 5 minutes before 2 o'clock, and then we'll do the next part of the presentation. So take this seriously. I know this is kind of a different style of teaching. I'm not sure if you've had your teachers just set you loose for 15 minutes, but staying in the Zoom. But let's do that. Take 15 minutes, find at least 3 leads of local companies, and add them to that job tracker. Any questions? Yes, Ryan, you can just copy it. You should be able to right here at the top where it says Student Job Tracker Template. Click the arrow and choose Duplicate Base. And yeah, all the data in here is fake. So, okay. Go and do, and we'll talk in 15 minutes. If you're watching the video, go ahead and just fast forward 15 minutes.
Caleb, you can also pause the recording in Zoom, if that helps.
Learn something new every day. I will do that. All right, welcome back. Couple of questions came up in the Slack channel that I want to address before we keep moving on. And the first one I want to talk about is what if you can't find jobs you're qualified for? All these jobs seem to require years of experience. And then related, that almost all of the positions say bachelor's in computer science. One of the reasons code schools or companies like Lambda School work, and one of the reasons you are able to learn this stuff and get a job, is because this is a field where it matters much more what you're able to do than what a piece of paper says about you. Now, that said, there are companies who may say, okay, we only hire computer science majors. Those companies are fewer and further between than they've been in the past. And I would say you are, just because someone lists it on the resume, consider it a wish list item, not a hard and fast rule. Again, that depends on the company, but most companies, they're going to put that on their job application because that's what they would prefer, but they aren't getting enough applicants, and you know the stuff that those CS majors are going to know, and so you can easily go in and apply for those positions. Be upfront. Don't lie and say you have a CS degree when you don't, but you can tell them, hey, I just went through a 6-month program that focused on web development and CS, and this is what I know. Give me a shot at an interview. And one thing that many companies are starting to realize is that people that didn't graduate in CS but that have learned CS oftentimes bring a lot of value that straight CS majors don't because of your different backgrounds. And that's kind of a diverse most teams would benefit from more diversity. So if you have a background in something different than CS, you can actually, I said most teams would benefit from more diversity. Every team would benefit from more diversity. So whatever your background is, you can come in and help a team that is full of CS majors. Yeah, same thing with years of experience. I would say anything that says under 5 years of experience is totally fair game for you to apply for. If it says more than 5 years of experience, that's pushing it. But they may still be open to hiring someone more junior than that if the job has been open for a while, or just depending on the needs of the company. So don't let those specific requests make you not apply for the job.
In regard to that, I've noticed a lot of kind of roles, especially in growing tech companies in my area, that they will have listings for, the job listing will say senior engineer, but their requirement is really, do you have around 3 years experience? Do you know JavaScript well?
Right.
And then even under like extra qualifications, it'll be like, do you know Redux? Do you know deployment, things like that? So I'm wondering, like, are those also within like fair game, or is that kind of like, okay.
Yeah, and you can say, excuse me, you can say in your application, look, I'm not a senior developer, but I do know all of the stuff that you've requested. Like, give me a shot.
Okay.
And yeah, so many of these places, it's like they care more about what you can do than what a piece of paper says, or even than your years of experience. And also, one thing to remember about job listings is that they're usually written by HR people that aren't technical and don't know what any of this stuff means. There's a joke. Swift is the language I'm most familiar with, Apple's programming language for that they announced in 2014. It's just over 3 years old. There are job listings out there that say Swift, 5 years of Swift experience. And it's like, well, guess what? That doesn't exist. That is not a thing. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what got me so interested in this whole kind of field, is just the ridiculousness of the recruitment process.
Yeah. Okay, a couple more questions before we go on. What about jobs that have stuff that we have learned, like React, Node, Express, etc., but then also have like 50 other technologies listed that you don't have experience with? This is a great example of, I'm not sure specifically the application you're mentioning. If you send me the link, I can pull it up and give some more detailed information. But most likely what this is a wish list of, an HR person sat down with a hiring manager and said, like, what is it that you want someone to know? And they sat there for 5 minutes and named off, 20 things or more. And that's how they came up with that list. But when you go into the interview, to be clear, I don't want any of you to be dishonest about your experience when you're applying for these positions. What I want you to do is be honest, transparent, upfront, and say, this is what I know, and I learned it in the last 6 months. And just think about what I'll be able to learn in the next 6 months. Or, I know people that, someone saw a position for Python, and their experience was mobile development. So they knew Objective-C and Swift, and they just spent the weekend learning Python and went and, learning the syntax, and went and made that work. So, and got an offer. So don't be afraid to apply for jobs that you aren't a perfect fit for, and just be open to explaining that you are new, but you learn quickly, and you are willing to do so. If I were to see someone who didn't have experience with a particular technology I had on a job listing, but I've seen that they consistently ship new projects and that they're willing to learn, then I'll hire them anyway. That's that doesn't bother me. So keep that in mind. Any other questions before we move on to the last topic for the day? Okay. So what I want to talk about is building your personal network. Basically, I want to talk about this concept, this informational interviews concept, and how that relates to having a contact inside of the company. And so the informational interviews are a way for you to ask questions and seek advice in a safe, comfortable environment that isn't like high pressure like a job interview is. And it's just a way to practice talking to people. And it's also because you'll be more comfortable and you'll be having these good conversations. They also can turn into real job offers, even though it wasn't a job offer or a job interview in the first place. So I want to talk about what this is. I mentioned earlier, so often the job you get is about who you know as much as it is about what you know. In other words, relationships matter. All but one job that I've had in my entire career has been because of someone I knew at the company. And the one job that I didn't know someone at the company was because I was a literal perfect fit for what they were hiring for. And the recruiter went onto LinkedIn and said, I want someone that has been a high school teacher, that knows Swift and iOS development. And I was, one of a handful of people in the world probably that fit that description. And so that's the only time in my entire career since I was, 12 years old that I've gotten a job that wasn't, with someone that I knew. So informational interviews are a way to build those relationships, ask questions, learn about a company or a role that you may be interested in, and again, practice talking to people in a semi-structured professional environment, similar to a job interview. So I want to share an example. I'm going to come back to this slide, but I'm going to share an example of how I started the process of having kind of what I would consider is an informational interview. So here it is. This is real world stuff. This is exactly the message that I sent and the responses that I got to schedule an informational interview to come to Lambda School. So take just a second and read that.
Yo, dog, are you down with that? Yeah, I'm down with that.
Okay. So, really, really just straightforward. I said I wanted to talk. This wasn't a job interview. This was me saying, hey, let's talk. And we did. And the next important part of having an informational interview is knowing what you want to get out of it. So I wrote some notes when I met with Austin and Ben. And, I said, I want to clarify my potential role at Lambda School. At the time, they were talking about potentially doing an iOS class, and that's why they were talking to me. And, I wrote out some notes basically saying, I don't just want to be over an iOS class, but I wanted to be involved in all of it. And, I had some other questions. And this actually after the lunch turned into about 3 pages worth of notes from the conversation that we had there. Um, there we go. There's an example of me getting an informational interview, me preparing for an informational interview, and then going and actually meeting them and doing so. So what I specifically want to mention is, want to point out is, Austin and Ben were not the only people that I reached out to around that time. Once I had decided that I was wanting to move back to Utah, and therefore was no longer going to be able to work at Apple, I reached out to a few different people and that I would be interested in working with, and basically said the same thing that I said to Austin. And these are people that I knew either had job openings or worked in the field that worked in positions that I wanted to work with, and so yeah, I wrote down a few of those names, wrote down what I wanted to talk to them about, and then sent them all messages that basically read like the one that I sent to Austin. And then again, I wrote down a list of what I wanted to review in that conversation. A couple of best practices for both scheduling and running informational interviews like this is, when you're asking someone for an informational interview, this does not need to be someone that you know. A lot of people will be excited to help you if you ask them, you say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about XYZ, or about the company that you're at, or things like that. Many people will feel flattered or encouraged and would love to be able to help you out. And so when asking, keep it short, introduce yourself, describe what you need help with, propose a time and place, and give it a time box. So something like, hey, I'm Caleb Hicks. I'm really interested in what you are working on at XYZ company, and it's something that I'd love to learn more about. Would you be open to lunch? I'd love to buy you lunch. Would you be able to meet for an hour sometime next week? And so that works if it's in person. If it is in person, try to meet, for coffee or lunch, something that's kind of a shorter commitment. And I recommend that you offer to pay if you can. They may not always take you up on that, but at least offer it. But this isn't just limited to in person. You can do these types of conversations, these types of informational interviews online. You can use FaceTime or Skype or Zoom or any number of services. And you can invite people that you've followed on Twitter or interacted with on Reddit or something like that. People that you know from online, you can also do this with. The other thing I would add is, don't be offended if the person doesn't respond or can't make it work. You guys know, you all know people are busy. That I will say, that is literally the worst that could happen from you inviting someone to do an informational interview, is they just don't respond. So don't be offended about that. There's lots of people out there that you can talk to. So I want us to do this quickly together, and then my closing invitation to you is going to be to go out and do it on your own. But is there a volunteer who's willing to go through this process with us?
I'm down for anything, bro. But yeah, I don't know.
All right, Patrick's volunteering.
Oh shit! I mean, whoops.
Oh, now I gotta edit this video. YouTube's gonna take us offline.
Oh, poopy.
Okay, so Patrick, let's do this. Can you pull up? Can you take over the screen share?
Sure.
and open up your Airtable that you put together, or however you made that list.
Yeah, I didn't really get terribly far with it.
Well, that's okay. Let's go through one. Do you have a company in mind that you would like to know more about or potentially work at?
Yeah, I mean, when I did the Google search, let me get rid of that. When I did the Google search, I did find some stuff in my area. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Oh, sorry. Let me get over to, hope there's nothing embarrassing here. Okay. Boom. Boom. Yeah, junior software engineer at Silvertech Incorporated in Manchester, New Hampshire via Glassdoor. I'm down.
Okay, so open that up.
Oh, goodness. Blurp.
There you go. So, Silvertech Inc., huh? So let's just check out the job description real quick. Did you read through this one?
No.
Let's find one that fits.
Okay, yeah, that's.
I know we're putting you on the spot, but I want to go through the process.
Yeah, you should add like JavaScript or Node or React to the search.
Yeah, if you put React.js up there, it should get you fun.
That will be somewhere in Boston. Okay.
Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun.
Boom. Bristol, Connecticut. I hear it's lovely there this time of year.
I actually have a very good friend that is now very high level at ESPN.
Here we go. That's who our informational interview is going to be with.
Boom.
No pressure, whoever volunteered that.
I already got my in. Okay, I got 5+.
Is Ryan. He's like a childhood friend, so it's totally cool.
Even
So
better.
5+ years, again, is probably pushing it.
Yes.
We can keep going with this example, though.
Okay, sure. So, Disney, we're still right. Disney owns ESPN.
That's right. Okay, so let's go ahead and take, the 30 seconds it'll take for you to put this into Airtable.
Let's copy this link. Let's get back to Airtable. And what do I do here? Duplicate base?
Yep.
Team 2, example bases?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Doodly 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 doo. You're loving that you chose me right now. I know it.
Oh, it's good. Gets us to go through the whole process. It's that one with the new banner on it. Go back.
New.
Right there.
Okay, yeah. So, what was this? ESPN. Yeah, ESPN. Bristol CT, company description, owned by Disney. Everybody loves Disney. Way out of my league.
Oh boy.
I'll give it a 1 star for Disney. I don't know. Oh, there, yeah. Bristol, CA, and link. And what else do we got here?
All right. Okay, so pause here. So I want us to go through a little bit of an exercise that doesn't involve Ryan's buddy, and then we may end up coming back to Ryan's buddy. But I want you to go to LinkedIn.
Hey, look, it's me.
And go ahead up in the search field, just search ESPN. So notice here in the list of people results for ESPN, the first results are going to be ranked by people that you know So first degree connections, second degree connections, third degree connections. Okay. So Noel Nash, Vice President of Emerging Businesses Stats and Information Group at ESPN, may not be the right fit to find someone here, but if you see those two shared connections that you have, in that list, are either of those like reasonable friends of yours?
Oh yeah, Juan. He's a good buddy. Gabe Oppenheim. I honestly couldn't even tell you how I know him without looking further.
That's okay. So what you
But
could
yeah,
do,
Juan.
what I want you to do when you're applying for jobs that are, 3 or 4 star interest levels is go through this process and so in this case, you could get Juan to introduce you to this guy at ESPN. Again, that's a little bit of work, but if you really want to work somewhere, this is the way to do it. Get an introduction, and then when you were to get that introduction, go ahead and go back to that search list. You would want to use this list to kind of evaluate who would be the best fit, right? Ooh, there you go. Recruiter at ESPN is probably even better than,
Oh, Brittany. Hey.
Yeah.
And again, not sure
Yeah.
how I know Gabe.
If you don't know who Oppenheim is, maybe you should get rid of him. Working through your network to get an introduction to someone will go a long way. And then with that introduction that you get, right now we'll write this as though we're writing it to Ryan's friend. Patrick, do you actually have any interest of working at ESPN?
No.
No. We should have chosen a better example then. But we'll pretend that you did for a second. And
Sure.
And we would, you ask people that you look on LinkedIn, you find your way to an introduction to someone at ESPN that could make a difference, and you decide you want to talk to them in an informational interview. So go ahead and pull up a text editor, just empty text file. And let's go ahead and just say, discussion notes for ESPN. And then just brainstorm questions that you would want to know about working at ESPN. So come up with a few. Nice. Okay, this is a good list to start with. I would, just as a note, I would avoid questions that you can find out either on their careers page or on like Glassdoor.
Like
401k probably is one of those. I know I'm putting you on the spot writing these, but I'm just, for future reference, you want to go into these having, some information on your side. And then let's go ahead and say that Ryan sent an introduction email between you and his buddy at ESPN. And now let's write out an email response that you could send that would land you one of these, that could potentially lead to a discussion.
His name is Daniel.
All right. We need hi Daniel.
Oh, right.
No pressure.
Hi. Doodly Blodgett.
No, don't say that. Okay. What are the main things that you want to do? I said them. I didn't.
Well, I always find these things just short and sweet and to the point. So
Yes.
just, these are my skills. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. I mean, depending on the nature of the introduction and whether or not this person knows that I'm asking for a job, but I think it would be a great company to work for. End on something positive and light, but just keep it short and sweet.
Yes. So I'm going to put here in Slack.
If I could add, if I were you, and this is only if the job happened to be in something, a media company, I would always mention that I worked for Pixar.
Oh my God.
Every single time.
All out on the
If it was a
street.
media company, because that's just like an extra,
Yeah, anything you've got in your history that contributes to them potentially wanting to meet with you goes a long way to that. So I just posted in the Slack channel my recommendations for how to ask. So keep it short, introduce yourself, describe what you need help with or what you want to talk to them about, propose a time and a place, and give it a time box.
What about the earliest convenience?
I wouldn't say that.
No.
I would just ask the question. I would just say, would you be available sometime next week, is basically how I would ask that. So Jess just asked, what happens if you can't meet in person? Yeah, just set a time or ask if there's a time that you can do FaceTime or Skype call.
Don't do Fridays. No one's getting anything done Friday after lunch. Oh, hey, don't worry.
Okay.
Is it better to propose an actual time like that or like a time window?
So I generally like to give, depending on the context, I like to give 2 specific times and then say, I maybe wouldn't do this for an informational interview, but in other cases, I like to give 2 specific times and then say, or if there's a better time for you next week, let me know. And that allows them, it eliminates some of their mental friction to making a decision on when to meet with you. And it also, but it also gives flexibility in case the times you propose don't work. Okay. So something along those lines would be great. Let's see. Is a phone call not good enough? A phone call is fine. Sometimes it's just better to be able to see the person, but yeah, do whatever makes sense for the person that you're talking to. Okay. All right. What I want to do, my task for you before we come back on Thursday is to schedule. I'm taking back over the screen. Thank you for being willing. I was going to have you send it, but you don't actually want to work at ESPN, so maybe next time I have a volunteer, I'll make you actually send it. What I would like you to do is before Thursday, I would like you to schedule at least 3 informational interviews with people you look up to in this industry. Those people can be online, they can be remote, they can be local. Try to have them be at companies you're interested in. Do not make it a job interview. Do not make it begging to work there, but make it just you are new to the industry. You want to learn from someone who has done this before and would love to talk to them. So schedule these 3 informational interviews, prepare your list of topics or questions. I don't expect you to have done the 3 interviews before Thursday, but I'm guessing a couple of you will. And I would love to hear about it when we come back on Thursday. If you have questions about how to do this or want some feedback or some encouragement, please reach out to me. But this is no joke. if I will be able to predict who will get jobs the fastest based on who takes this seriously. If you do this before Thursday, you're going to most likely get a job within a month of graduating. You're going to be one of the early ones. If you don't take it seriously, then I'm not wishing you ill on your job search, but I'm emphasizing how big of a deal these are. So please take this seriously. Does this have to be with random strangers? Of course not. It should be someone in an industry that you or at a company that you want to work at. And I wouldn't, if I were you, I wouldn't not talk to someone just because they're a stranger. That's, get an introduction, but this person becomes in your student tracker, this person becomes your contact, your ally, your man or woman on the inside that is going to help you get the job that you want. So real quick, I want you to go into Slack. I'm going to write a question there. Okay. So I just went in, I asked, will you schedule at least 3 informational interviews before Thursday? And I would like you, I know this is corny, but I would like you to go in and make a commitment to do so. Thumbs up sort of counts. Okay, once again, I will be able to predict who will get jobs the fastest based on who takes this the most seriously. So please do so. And I look forward to hearing about it on Thursday. We will be talking about resumes, LinkedIn, portfolios, basically how to present yourself in the application process, everything that leads up to you getting an interview on Thursday. So come prepared with your questions. We're also going to have the career services staff schedule some time to review resumes one-on-one with each of you. They're going to be spending time individually with each of you leading up to graduation. The last thing I'll throw out, quite a few of you have applied to potentially be TAs. We're going to talk this week with those of you that have. You should be going through this process even if you want to stay here as a TA, and we'll help you be able to negotiate an offer that begins once you finish working as a TA. Let me just double check any last questions. If you have any last questions for today, now's the time.
You mentioned in the beginning that we're going to talk a little bit about the demo day. I don't know if that's still something we're going to talk about, or we're just going to wait on it.
So I only heard about the first half of what you said, so I'll talk about demo day and then ask a follow-up if I didn't address everything that you have. Jocelyn, I'm not sure I'm not sure if any of you have had the opportunity to work with her or see her around yet. But we hired her, and one of her main jobs is to work with all of our hiring partners and to organize demo day. The way demo day is going to work is you're going to submit some information to our career services team that's going to allow us to build some profile pages for you. You're going to build a resume and compile a few other resources that will be made available to all of our hiring partners. And then on demo day, what we'll do is have group presentations that should be pretty rehearsed and well practiced with everyone speaking. We'll give you a template and format for that will work well, but demoing your capstone project. This will allow you to introduce yourself, talk about your project, the parts that you built, and put yourself out in front of our hiring partners. There will be some hiring partners in the Zoom event that we'll be holding, but we'll also be streaming the demo day live on YouTube and Facebook, and we'll obviously record it and make it available on both platforms as well. And then from there, let's see. Are the career professionals Lambda hired going to help us with finding job opportunities? I just would like to know the role they are going to play for us. They are going to be most helpful in coaching you through the process. So we've covered pretty much everything that you need to be able to find open opportunities near you and to help generate open opportunities with using those informational interviews. They will help you with whatever it is that you need help with, but finding openings is probably, they aren't going to be able to find openings that as well as you are going to be, because you know your preferences better than they do. That's a good question. The biggest role they're going to play is they're going to help you get yourself ready, like resume, LinkedIn, practice interview skills, and then they can coach you through the process. Like before an interview, even after you graduate, you can work with them to, as you work through each of the steps from applying to negotiating an offer. So I'll have them share more about how and when they plan to do each of those steps with you. They have a handful of workshops that they do, some of which runs in conjunction with the things that I'm covering, but yeah, that's what they're here for. Will we be talking about our personal projects? I will double check on that. I know the capstone project is probably the biggest focus, but I will check with Jocelyn. I'm not the one planning the presentations, but your personal project will definitely be on like your profile and your resume and stuff like that, so the employers will be able to see it. Will students doing internships also be able to also demo the work they've done during their internship? That is going to depend on the place that you've done your internship at. Let's talk about specifics. They may or may not be fine with you demoing what you've worked on, but we'll make sure that you're able to present. So Patrick, let's talk more specifics. Patrick or anyone else in that situation, go ahead and let's talk more specifics afterwards. Any other questions before we wrap up for today? Oh, you probably want to know when demo day is. It's the Thursday before your last day of class, which I believe is the Thursday is the 11th, January 11th. A couple of people are typing, so we'll wait for those to come in. Do we have a definitive time for demo day? Okay, there's conflicting information. I heard it was the 18th. I will double check right now, and I will post it in CS1. It is either the 11th or the 18th, and I apologize that I don't know that off the top of my head, but I will make sure that you know in the next 10 minutes. Any other questions?
I posted one in just to you personally, but I just wanted to make sure that I got a kind of an answer on it, because I definitely want to send out the informational interview messages, but I'm actually leaving. I'm going out of the country on Thursday morning.
Yeah, so send them out. Just schedule them for a time that works for you.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to post a poll in a poll or a survey in the CS1 channel. I'd love to get some feedback on what you thought about this time that we spent together today. I know we covered a lot of ground, and so I'd just love to hear what worked for you and what didn't. Appreciate all of your time. Really excited about where all of you are at, and really excited to hear about, really excited to work with you, and also hear about your successes in landing your first position. So thanks again, and I'm going to, yeah, I'll be available if you have any questions, and that's it. Thank you. Have a good day. Keep working hard on your projects, and we'll talk again Thursday.